Sonic has a pretty fun history with handhelds, right? So we have the Game Gear, where kind of his history began, right? You have a port of Sonic 1, you have a port of Sonic 2, you have some original Game Gear titles, and that's kind of it for a while. And then Sega fails as a console manufacturer and breaks into the Nintendo scene, right? And now you're seeing Sonic on Game Boy, with the Sonic Advance series, and then Sonic Battle, and all sorts of other little spin-offs, right? At this time, Sonic has successfully transitioned over to being a multi-console IP, right? And succeeds very well on the Nintendo platforms, on the handheld market, right? Overall, Sonic has a storied history on these handheld systems, let it be Nintendo or Game Gear prior. So when we have Sonic Generations coming out, and it has the history of all the Sonic games, best reviewed Sonic levels, and all this fun jazz, you would think that maybe the 3DS version, which is the handheld version of, this title, you'd imagine the anniversary to celebrate Sonic's handheld games and not his console titles. And unfortunately, that's not quite what we have here. But hey, hello, this is part 2 of a series where we're going through the Sonic Generations ports, all of its versions. On the part 1, we went through the HD original release of Sonic Generations. Today on part 2, we'll be going over the 3DS title, and on the next part, we'll be going over the Sonic X Shadow Generations title. If you want to see what I said on that video, click on it. I'll have a link in the description. But yeah, otherwise, chill out, hang out, enjoy my take on Sonic Generations for the 3DS. So first off, so we don't have to address it, we have the story, right? It is the exact same story as the main HD title. Nothing has changed. Really, the only difference here is the presentation. That's because it's a different kind of hardware. They weren't able to have like actual full-blown cutscenes. Instead, you have these floating head cutscenes where it's like a dialogue box and you got their heads floating there, and the heads will change depending on what their reaction's supposed to be. This is actually a pretty common thing they used to do on handhelds all the time back in the day, and you'll still see it on modern day gaming too every once in a while on a more budgetary title. So yeah, it's just one of those kind of things, but other than that is the exact same narrative that we've seen before. Nothing's changed beyond that. Now the game itself does have a little bit of a different flow in general though. This game is controlled mostly through a menu-based system, and that's a shame, because the 3DS is powerful enough. If they wanted to, they probably could have a full hub for you to explore. I'm guessing this is more of a time and budget issue and not a hardware limitation. I also feel like the multi-screen facet of the DS or 3DS is underplayed here. Instead, it's mostly used as a menu selection tool, or in gameplay, it is used as a line that shows you how far along in the stage you're in, or in a boss fight, it shows you like the boss's health, and that's kind of it. And that's kind of a shame. With the hardware like the 3DS, there's a lot of cool gimmicks that you could do that this game just kind of missed out on. But hey, what can you do? Just like the HD version, this game kind of uses the different eras of Sonic as a way to divide the levels. Again, you have the classic, adventure, and modern Sonics represented here. Act 1, classic Sonic. Act 2, modern Sonic. Just like it is in the HD version. Though there is something a little different. After you complete Act 1 and Act 2, there's a special stage you have to complete. Yeah, I know, the HD version didn't have a special stage at all. This title does. So like, you remember Sonic Heroes, right? Do you remember those special stages? Well, if you liked those ones, I have a treat for you. These are basically a complete carbon copy, except, this is gonna sound crazy, it has a better game feel? So like, anyone who's played Sonic Heroes tends to have the exact same complaint. The game's kinda slippery wherever you go, right? And that translates over to the special stages as well. But in this, they don't really have that problem. Instead, it actually controls quite magnificently. Here you are, you're running down a giant tube, and in this tube you got bombs, you have balloons, and what do you want to do? You want to collect those balloons. Those balloons allow you to create a boost state, and you boost. And the goal is just to keep boosting till you catch up with the Chaos Emerald. If the Chaos Emerald gets to the end of the stage before you do though, you lose out and you have to try out again. Very simple concept, begins pretty easy, and it gets kind of challenging by the end, and I enjoy the special stages in this game all the way through. At the end of every zone you have a special stage. And if you do your math real quick, you'll realize that means there's only 7 zones in this game. Yeah, the HD version has 9. This game, 7. That's a notch for the disappointment scale right there. And once you get past the zones, you get past the special stages, you then get to the boss gate, which at the boss gate will have your rival fight and your boss for the era that you're in. So I guess the best phrase to think of is condensed. This game is very condensed. Moving on to the actual zones, the very first one we have is Green Hill Zone. You expect it, it makes sense for a generational title, it works, awesome. Act 1 Classic Sonic is actually pretty cool because the stages pretty well represent the original classic titles. It's almost like a carbon copy of those original stages. Very well done. Also, may I say, I think Sonic controls here more closer to his classic counterpart than he did in the HD version. Modern Sonic here, I do have a couple of bones to pick with. Overall, he controls fine. He plays a lot closer to the Rush games than he does with any of the other handheld versions of Sonic, which is great. It makes sense. This is a Boost era Sonic game. Having a modern Sonic using Boost all adds up perfectly fine. But what I have a problem here, and I know this is a classic Sonic problem in general, is the camera. The camera feels a little too close up for you to be able to react properly, considering the Boost era Sonic is very reaction heavy versus the classic Sonic being more about momentum preservation, you know? That being said, just like with classic Sonic, the game feel of modern Sonic is pretty damn good, I'm not gonna lie. The controls in this game hit just right. It's just some of those camera issues that kind of build up steam over time, you know? They do try to be a little bit more creative with modern Sonic a bit too, specifically with the set pieces and the camera. The camera will change around to more of a 2.5D angle, a little bit slightly behind him, or during those more high intensive like action set pieces. You'll see the camera directly in front of him or directly behind him, just to give you more like auxiliary motion, I guess. We all know Sonic loves his roller coasters, and this is very roller coaster-esque. The other two zones for this era of Sonic is Casino Night, which I think is actually a really good pick for this era of Sonic. After all, what is Sonic without his casino levels? It's 1-in-1 it needs to be, especially after Sonic 2, which is what this game represents. For Sonic 3, they have Mushroom Hill Zone, or really Sonic 3 and Knuckles, or just Sonic and Knuckles, however you want to divide it. Either way, this is a pretty fun choice. Again, I think an issue of it just being a first stage of a game, again, does create a problem of it being a little bit on the simpler side, but I kind of get it. I still would have picked the Death Egg Zone just because that is a more climactic stage. Or actually, considering the boss fight you fight in this game, I would have picked a Launch Base Zone to represent this game. I do like the set piece here. You have the vine that you're grinding on and you're boosting through the flowers and the camera is going woo, you know. I think it is a cool idea, a cool set piece, a cool showing of technology. Probably the best set piece for the classic era Sonic, if I have to say. Just like in the HD version, your rival here is Metal Sonic. This game's rival fights go for a more Sonic Rivals style, so instead of it being a direct boss fight, it's a race. Though unfortunately, there's not much you can do to retaliate against them. They can hurt you and that's kind of annoying, but they're not too bad. You just have to make sure you conserve your boost and use it at the best times possible because you don't have endless boost, you don't have any enemies to gain boost, and rings aren't everywhere in these levels. So you gotta kind of conserve that and use it when it matters most. And yeah, that's kind of it. Unfortunately, all three rival fights are basically the same. The only thing that really changes is the level layout that you're racing on and the aesthetic of the level. That's kind of it. Overall, the rival fights themselves are a big disappointment compared to the HD version. Now, Boss Gate 1, who are we fighting, right? I said Launch Base Zone would make sense because of the fight we have here, and if you guess it, it's gonna be Big Arms. That's right, we're not fighting the Death Egg Robot, we're fighting the Big Arms, which was the final fight in base Sonic 3. I think this was a really cool choice, considering Big Arms can be kind of avoided if you connect Sonic 3 and Knuckles. So I think this is a little cool thing they got going on here. Also, I need to say, out of all Sonic generations, I mentioned something around this before. Chemical Plant in this game has one of the best musical remixes, right? This boss fight, please listen to it. The Big Arms boss fight is one of the best remakes that you can have of any OST. It's so good. I honestly beg you to listen to it. It sounds so good. They did such a fantastic job with it. No joke, will listen to this song randomly every once in a while. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that song, and it gets trapped in my head and I have to listen to it like 100 times until it goes. It's so good. Please give it a listen. Like, I just listened to it right now after recording this, and scientifically there's no reason for it to be this good. The boss fight itself is basically just a carbon copy of the original version, so honestly nothing really to say there. And overall, I have to say the classic stages, they picked decent choices. I already mentioned my grievances. I wish they picked something different for Sonic 3 again, or that point in Sonic 3 or Sonic and Knuckles, Sonic 3 or Knuckles. However you want to divide it for that portion of Sonic. I do wish they picked a different stage, but overall, not bad at all. Now we move over to the adventure stages. For Adventure 1, they pick Emerald Coast, the tutorial stage for Sonic Adventure. It makes me think of Sonic Adventure. It's what comes to mind when I think of this era of Sonic, honestly. Really good choice, and I think they did a good job recreating the Orca chase scene in modern Sonic, so good for you there. But for classic Sonic, this is when things get a little strange for me. You see, in the HD version, they kind of hint at homing attack being a feature that the classic Sonic can learn, and I do believe you can unlock that as an ability, but it's not level, needed to progress, and it's also not really story, he learns it and he has it locked down, not until, the end moments of the game, where it doesn't even matter for gameplay's sake, right? But in the 3DS version, classic Sonic does learn the homing attack, and becomes pivotal from this stage onwards. And the only true reason why that's annoying to me, it's not because of the sanctity of classic Sonic and how he needs to maintain a very specific style, blah blah blah. No, it's because it makes his levels feel more similar to modern Sonic. And at that point, what's the reason for having a classic and modern version, right? I'd like them staying distinctly different from each other. It does create a better, Act 1, Act 2 style. Instead, this kind of makes them feel more similar to each other. Though that's more of a nitpick than an actual hard graded complaint that affects the score of the game or whatever. Another not real complaint is that the next stage they picked was Radical Highway. And technically lore accurate, this was Shadow Stage and not Sonic Stage. Sonic never ran through that, blah blah. That's a little nitpick thing. I don't really care too much about that. I mentioned this in the other video. There are better choices they could have picked. I would have picked the Arc for this, especially considering the boss will be fighting after this. But, this is what they chose, and it works out fine enough. I just have my misgivings with the choice itself. The level, though, is kind of dog shit. This is when there's just bottomless pits thrown everywhere for some strange reason. It's just really weird and awkward. Truly, the DIMP-style level design shows up here, more than any other zone, I'd say. Oh yeah, I didn't really mention this. The 3DS version of Sonic Generations was developed by DIMPS, the same guys who made the Sonic Advance series, which has a chronic complaint of bottomless pits everywhere. Overall, though, I tend to be okay with DIMPS. They have a great feel for Sonic as a whole. It's just their level design can be kind of dickish. This is also where the camera being too zoomed in for modern Sonic really hits, because it's kind of hard to miss those bottomless pits or really know where you're going when there's nothing on screen except you and the platform you're on, and you just hope. Leaps of faith are something that should be cut from modern day gaming unless you're making specifically those hard as nails kind of games, If you're trying to make it, sure, but if you're just doing a more casual-ish game Sonic the Hedgehog, stay away from that kind of level design, please and thank you. So the rival here we have is Shadow the Hedgehog, just like in the HD version, and just like I mentioned before, it is a race just like with Metal Sonic, nothing changed there unfortunately. The big boss fight here is the Bio-Lizard. I think this is actually a pretty fun choice to represent the adventure era of Sonic. Again, the nitpickers say Sonic didn't actually fight the Bio-Lizard, it was Shadow. But still, I think it's a pretty nice choice. This kind of fits in with this era very well. I just think the Bio-Lizard as a whole is kind of a boring boss fight in the original version and in this version. That's kind of the only big problem, that the boss low-key sucks. But it's fine enough, I guess. Alrighty, now we're on to the modern era. And this is when my honest-to-God complaint of this game comes into fruition. The missed opportunity. You see, for the modern era, the boost era, they pick Water Palace and Tropical Resort. These are both games from Sonic's handheld history. Water Palace from Sonic Rush and Tropical Resort from Sonic Colors DS. This game, this entire time, should have and could have been, instead of Sonic Generations through his main console titles like the HD version, as this is a handheld version of that game, it should have been you playing through the history of Sonic's handheld games. The best reviewed levels for the handheld titles. That would have been such a cool opportunity. They missed out on such an awesome just thing they could have done here. It's just so annoying and sad and depressing, just like the HD version. This title, this Sonic Generations project as a whole, is just one missed opportunity after another, and it's really upsetting to see the pieces there, the obvious choices they could have picked without really too much thought. They could have just done it. And it doesn't take much thought to get there, you know? It's just, ooh, that'd be a fun idea. And boom. I just don't know why that wasn't the option. The best I can imagine is that the main console titles are the ones that people know and recognize, so those were the ones they wanted to remake. But then you look at the modern era and like, why'd they pick Water Palace? I didn't know anything about Sonic Rush at that time. I never experienced this stage to begin with. And I still found it a really cool idea to see, oh, that's from that Sonic game that came out for the DS on this handheld game. I don't know, man. It's just sad to see a missed opportunity that would have been such a perfect idea just dropped. I don't know. This is what we got. This is what it is. Rant over. I don't have anything specific to say about these zones I didn't say already. Any Radical Highway problems I have are pushed forward to these two zones as well, so there's that. Though I will say I do like the end set piece for Tropical Resort. You have the 3 rails you're grinding on, you're dodging meteors being thrown at you or whatever, and you just kind of jump between the 3. It's a cool little thing, nothing too hard, but it's a fun, like, spurt of energy, you know? For the rival here, we got Silver the Hedgehog, and once again, he's the same as the other 2 rival fights, it's just a race. Sad, womp womp. For the boss of this era, I don't know what they were thinking, but they chose the Egg Emperor from Sonic Heroes, a game that wasn't even represented here at all. Really odd choice, but very well done. They took a boss that was inherently in a 3D space and put him in a 2D format, and he worked very well. They did a good job translating this boss. Good on them, honestly. I do still think the choice is wonky at best. I mean, I did a whole rant on it already, but if you already tackled the handheld titles in some regard, at least do a handheld boss here. But I guess they went with the Egg Emperor, and I'm not entirely upset with the results here. Alright, so you played the game, you played all 7 zones, and at the end you did all 7 special stages like we mentioned earlier, and boom, you unlock the final gate. You know what it is, boys, girls, theys, thems, all of the above? We are at the Time Eater. Are you guys ready for a plot twist? I don't know if this is just a me take, if it's a hot take. I haven't really found anyone on the internet that has the same take. I also haven't really looked for anyone with any kind of take like this. But in the 3DS version, that's right, Sonic Generations 3DS, the Time Eater is a pretty fun boss fight, honestly. I don't have much complaints. It's hard to really describe game feel, especially when it's so drastically different. So you have the HD version where everything feels so slippery and slow at the same time. Everything is just not working the way you perceive it should be. I actually like the Sonic Heroes special stage topic I talked about earlier, where the special stages felt slippery and crazy in the original, but in the 3DS version here, it's very solid. And I feel like it's the same thing here, where the HD version of Sonic Generations, the Time Eater felt very loosey-goosey here and there, but the boss fight here is very direct. When you press the button to move, when you move accurately to your direction. I don't know how to really pinpoint this, man. This is a whole new thing for me, trying to really describe this. It just has better game feel all around. It's very clear on what you're supposed to do and how to do it. Bravo, Dimps! You made the Time Eater a good boss fight to have, and I never thought I'd say that at all about this game. His attacks are well telegraphed and dodgeable without much problem, and, this is the best thing, You do not have any dialogue peeking through those microphones as you're fighting this boss. That means you're not hearing that damn homing shot audio. You and the boss, mano a mano. Again, bravo. The game itself is about 2 to 3 hours depending on your skill level, and you may be thinking to yourself, what do you do after you beat this game? I mean, what else is there? You just have these zones and bosses, right? For extra content, we have the mission list. So in the HD version, to help extend the gameplay, you have the challenge gates, right? Most of them aren't necessary. There's a couple of them that you have to do for padding's sake, but otherwise the grand majority of them are up for you to explore to do if you enjoy the gameplay loop and you want to keep experiencing the game, right? This game doesn't quite have that, unfortunately. What this game does, detached from the single player campaign, is they'll have an entirely different menu dedicated to these missions. They'll be act and zone specific, so you get to re-experience these zones over and over again the way you like them, you know? I feel like not enough people have looked into these missions though, because I don't really know how to unlock all of them. We know S-ranking the levels helps, as well as playing the versus mode. Oh yeah, this game has a versus mode. I never touched it. I don't have friends. I have no clue what it's about at all, actually, sorry. Also, apparently reaching 99 lives will unlock some missions. But for the most part, you can actually use the 3DS Play coins to unlock the missions as a total, so you don't really have to do anything special to get them. Does anyone actually remember the Play coins for the 3DS? Maybe? It was neat. I never used them. I guess they existed, right? It was something they tried to do with the 3DS ecosystem. But honestly, I don't think it made it that big in the States. I don't know how the rest of the world used them, or if they used them well enough to incentivize it even existing. Actually, if anybody knows about them, please let me know. I'd love to hear about those play coins and what they really did in most games, if there was anything. I'm actually pretty curious. But yeah, that's it. That is the total of Sonic Generations for the 3DS. Again, tons of missed opportunities. Kinda sad and depressing, but this is all we got. That's all Sonic Generations was. Until like a decade later when we get the Sonic X Shadow Generations Remastered Completion Collection thing, right? Which we will be talking about in the next video. So if you want to see that, you know, subscribe, ring the bell, the whole thing, so you can see when that comes live. Otherwise, I want to thank you guys for staying here this long. If you have any questions, any concerns, any thoughts, anything you want me to cover after I'm done with this Generation project, please let me know. I've had a lot of fun with this so far. I'm gonna have fun replaying through the X Shadow portion. I played through it when it first came out. It's been a hot second. I got to play through it again for this review to really get my brain juices going. So yeah, that's all we got today. I'll see you guys next time for the next video, right? Until then, peace out.